My name is Linda van der Paal, and I'm a developer at Finalist. The notebooks still say eProfs because that's what it was up until 2 months ago. We've just been right in the middle of a merger right now. I've been a developer for about 13 years. I'm also an avid lover of all things agile. So I've been going to a lot of agile conferences as well. And at these agile conferences, I found this technique called sketchnoting. And so in this talk, I'm going to tell you all about what sketchnoting is, why you should do it, how to do it, and I'll give you some references on how to get started. So first of all, what are sketchnotes? Sketchnotes are notes, plain text notes, that you've enriched with images, colors, and some arrows and lines, things to make it look more interesting. So you might wonder, but I've heard about this thing called mind maps. Is it the same? Well, a mind map is a sketch note, if you ask me, but a sketch note is not necessarily a mind map. So sketch note is like a superclass of mind maps. Sketch notes are all about ideas, not about art. So for example, here you have 2 trees, and the lower one may look prettier, but the top one is still very much a tree. And the same goes for a book, or even for looking. So why would you do it? Well, first of all, is better memory retention. Whereas before, I used to go to conferences a lot, and I would say, yeah, that was this cool conference, and what did you see? Let me have a look at the program. I don't know, it was really cool though. Now I can give talks for about an hour about everything I've seen at a 2-day conference. And that's usually not quite enough time. So one thing to know is that if you type notes, you don't remember very much of it. If you write them by hand, the motoric skills you need to do the actual writing means that you'll remember it better. However, if you add graphics to it, that involves more parts of your brain and will therefore also put in more connections between all your memories, which means you'll remember it even better. It also improves your focus and concentration, because you have to really listen to what somebody says to be able to draw at the same time. You have to also, it forces you to think, to process what you're hearing, and to filter the information, because there's no way you can write fast enough to write it all down. So you have to really carefully make all those connections during the talk rather than afterwards when you're reading your notes. And the most important reason why you do it is because it's fun. It's a lot of fun to do, even when you can't draw. So how do you do it? If you ask anyone if they can draw, if you ask a 6-year-old child, most of them, I think 99%, no doubt, will say, yes, I can draw. Look, this is a tree, and this is my mommy, and this is me. However, if you ask an adult, most of them will say, I can't draw, I can't do that. That's way too hard. But the thing is, it's about the context. Because a child doesn't know very much about art yet, usually. Whereas an adult, if they think about drawing, they'll think about stuff like the Mona Lisa and all these other great artists that are out there that make great art. The thing is, you don't have to do art to be able to draw. Anything you learned in kindergarten is more than enough to actually get your ideas across. So, but really, everyone can draw. You don't have to draw well, you just have to draw. And if you start doing it, very quickly you find out that lots of people who see you make your sketch notes during conferences will say, wow, that looks great, even though you think, damn, that looks crap, it really failed. So, tools. Pretty much anything goes. You can just use simple pen and paper, or as I've done, I've made a selection of markers that I use. I've simply bought at HEMA. You can also buy and I've made this lovely little holder so I can put it on my knee during a conference and it won't slide off like the boxes all do. You can also buy sets like that from Stabilo. They have these lovely marker sets with 25 colors. But you don't need all those colors. I've seen really great sketch notes in all black and white. It works if it works for your style. I've also heard of people using iPads and graphical tablets. I prefer the pen and paper because for me the motion and stuff helps, and I like the fact that it's tactile and I can just take them out of my bag and show them around at conferences. You can do that with an iPad, of course, but so there's also, you can go cheap like I did from HEMA, and there's all these really great markers that you can get at the art stores that cost like 8 to 10 euros a piece, if not more. So pretty much it's just try some stuff. I would advise you to start cheap to see if you like it, and then if you really like it and you have a bit of a feeling for it, you can graduate to the more expensive stuff so you don't go bankrupt trying this. Once you start drawing, you'll find out that everything in this world, if you draw it, is made out of 5 shapes. You've got the simple circle, you've got a square, you've got a triangle, you've got a line, and you've got a dot. For example, here are some images. The first one is a car, which is basically some boxes and some lines and some circles, a house, a book, which is like drawn out squares, a bowling ball, which is simply a bunch of circles, or a laptop. It doesn't have to be complex. You can just draw the idea and try it out. So people are really hard to draw. But usually you don't want to do artworks of the speakers, although you can, of course, if you're bored and you have the time. But usually a simple stick figure is enough to get the idea of a person across, and you can just label it with the name and you still know who the speaker was. And slightly more work, but still easy, is the star-shaped people. You simply draw a circle and then draw a one-line star-shaped thingy that you can use the arms and the legs. You can still point them in different directions. You can make them a bit bendy. And the final method I want to highlight is the gray method, which is the body is a square with some wiggly lines for arms and a little head on the neck. By the way, if you do stick figures, don't ever give your person a neck, because it will look really, really weird if you do. Whereas if you draw the line straight up against the head, it will look a lot better. To practice with this, it would be a good idea to just, sometimes when you have a spare hour or something, just practice different positions, to practice a person running or waving or whatever you think you might need at some point, just to see if you can get the poses across. Because that can be really hard sometimes. Another aspect is lettering. A lot of people say, but my handwriting sucks. Well, there are several characters, and there's another piece of advice for handwriting later. First of all, there's the single line, which is the easiest and the quickest. But sometimes you want something, for example, for the title, that is a little more fancy, so it attracts more attention. You can do the 2-line, that you can either, if you put the lines really close together, it will look like a bold letter, or you can leave it open. There's also the triple line, if you want even bigger font. And the hardest one is the block letters, because you have to leave the space open without help lines. The most important advice for writing is write slowly. Just write less if you can't write enough, but write slowly and your handwriting will become more legibly because you spend more time on it. And as soon as if you do that and you write more and more, you'll find out that you can slowly go faster again. But you have to start really slowly and really draw the characters, and then they suddenly become beautiful. In my sketch notes, you can always tell whether I've done something during the talk or if you've made it afterwards, because if I do it afterwards, it's usually much prettier lettering than if I do it during the conference itself. There are several ways, several structures and patterns to use for your sketch notes. The mind map is like the radial pattern. It's the second one. There's also the linear one, which is what I use. It's just I divide my page into 2 columns. I start at the top of the first column, work my way down, and then start at the second column. And once I run out of paper, usually the talk is done. And if not, I scribble something in the middle somewhere. There's also the vertical pattern, which is basically you start at the top and you work all the way down, which also works nicely if you have very long paper, like scrolls, or you can just go on to the next page. There is the path pattern, where you write down an idea at one point, and then you write a second idea, and you just draw an arrow in between, and then you go for a third, and you write another arrow, and you can follow the arrows all the way across your paper wherever you have some space left, and that's the pattern that the entire presentation followed. There is the popcorn pattern, which is basically little ideas all over the place, and there is no real structure on them. There is the modular pattern, which can be squares in my little sample, with the title at the top and then some blocks for the content. It can also be circular. And I know somebody who divides his paper into 4 parts, and then every part is, the talk is an hour, every part will be about 15 minutes. And he'll use some sidelines where he can add some extra ideas if he needs them. And the pattern that I still don't really get, but was mentioned in the Sketchnote handbook that I'll also show later, is the skyscraper pattern, where you also have 3 long columns. So for me, I once heard about mind mapping, and it sounds so cool with pictures and everything. But when I started in the middle, and then the ideas would all go up to the top, and I would end up not having enough space for the rest of the structure, while 3/4 of my page was empty. So the point here is that you really have to just try out different structures to see which one fits you best. Because as soon as I started on the linear pattern with 2 columns, it worked a lot nicer for me, and I can usually fit a 1-hour talk onto an A5 piece of paper. There are 2 approaches to sketchnoting. One is the real-time, which I've been doing today, is just make the notes as I go during the presentations. The other approach is the 2-stage. You make rough notes during the presentation, and then afterwards you put some more structure in there and look up some images that you couldn't figure out during the presentation, and you make a really nice sketch note afterwards. The advantage is that you can figure out where you need the space the most, but the disadvantage is that it takes extra time after the presentation, and I'm a bit lazy every now and then, and I usually don't finish my sketch notes afterwards if I don't do them straight away. I never finish because I've gone on to other stuff. So I prefer the real-time option, but sometimes a conference is really interactive and you have to be really involved, and then you can't make notes during because your hands are doing other stuff. And that's when I use the 2-phase commit. You make some hasty scribbles during the presentation, and then I work out the sketch note afterwards. So basically my advice is just do it. Just go out and try. Have your sketch notes suck really big time, but keep at it. You will get better. I will show some of the progression from my sketch notes later to really see that, yes, you will get better once you do this more. Because you need practice. For me, I don't practice a lot of stuff at home, but I visit about 8 to 10 conferences a year, so I get quite a bit of practice that way. So the references, and I've brought some with me, is the Sketchnote handbook by Mike Rohde. Mike Rohde is the guy who coined the sketchnote phrase. Lots of people had, of course, been doing this before because, well, as long as people have been doodling, they've been making sketchnotes, and sometimes the doodles were on the talk or whatever, or the meeting. The other times they were not, and they were just doodles. But as soon as you use images to on topic of whatever your notes are about, then you can call it a sketch note. This is a really great book. It was made in the form of a sketch note, but since writing it all by hand would have taken him so much time, he had somebody make a font out of his handwriting to speed up the process a bit. It shows a lot. Basically, this is the summary of the book. But it gives a lot of examples and nice sketch notes from other people to show how you can do this and to figure out what works for you. The second one is the Sketchnote Army. That's a website where a lot of sketchnoters showcase their work. I haven't written a blog for them yet, but I'm still planning to. Once again, there is my procrastination at work because I've been sketchnoting for 2 years now and been planning to write that blog the entire time. And the third reference is the Bicablo books by Neuland. There are several of them, and they're basically a graphical dictionary. They've got all these great simple images of like animals, objects, of things people can do. They're not really cheap, but they're well worth the money, because if you do something at home, you can just leaf through it and figure out, okay, how do I draw this? And it will probably be in there. Another resource I use a lot for a two-stage sketch note is Google. If I look for something and I'm like, how would I draw this? I just go to Google Images, see how the pictures look, find one that's not too hard to draw, and use that. And you'll notice that as time goes by and you've done more sketch notes, you'll build more of your own vocabulary as you go. There are certain images that you will see again and again in my sketch notes. So this is the entire sketch note. As you can have probably surmised, I drew this myself. I actually have the paper copy laminated with me. This is where I started 2 years ago. I had some pictures of people who were learning, and cognitive learning was learning by doing, so I had them dig a hole and build a mountain out of it. And there is a chocolate bar to show that rewards can motivate. This is the second one, where I mostly used the graphics that were in the presentation itself. But a few months later, this was my second attempt. Already there was color, because by now I had bought some markers. And there were a few more images. I think this is about a year later. And there is a dinosaur because of extinction. And there is money and big sacks of money. And a highlight for success. And this is yet another one where I drew, I think the tree was actually in her presentation as well. This one was JFall last year, about healthcare. So there were alerts with these flashing lights, and there were watches and phones and footsteps, and a little picture of the app itself. And there was a leaf for Canada. This is one that I drew after the event, because the Agile Coach Camp is a very interactive event. And there is no way you can really make... I think I had about 4 real-time sketch notes during the entire conference, and I went to 10 sessions. So somebody suggested a 1-sentence summary for each session so we could share what we've learned during the conference. I didn't go to that session, but I did make the 1-line summaries, so I just added some graphics to that. This is one from the recent Code Motion sessions. I'm guessing you would recognize this, Bert-Jan, because it's your session. So there was a waterfall approach, which I drew as a big pile of water, and some sorting algorithm with balls with numbers. And finally, I've also brought some sketch notes by some friends of mine to show you well, you've now sort of got a feeling for my style because you've seen all the sketch notes. But this is another option. This is a black and white sketch note that is used only gray to highlight stuff. And Laurens was my mentor in sketchnoting. He's the one who infected me with the virus. And, well, he does great stuff. I don't even think this is the best sketch note of his, but this is one I could find and one that I'd still like to share. Another black and white sketch note, but once again, completely different. I have somebody who uses a bit more colors, and she used blocks. And when I asked her for permission to use this, she said, yeah, sure, you can, but why use this one? I've probably got prettier ones around. And I'm like, yes, but this was the one I found. And the final one from yet another friend who uses a lot more color like I do, but she also uses more big blocks and is a lot better at summarizing stuff. This is probably also more the radial pattern around the big concept of value. And that was the final slide I have. I have no clue how much time we have left. Okay, so then I would suggest that most of you will probably have pen and paper. So just try to write your name as nice as possible. Just practice it. I can probably and you can do it regular, or you can try cursive, which is a lot harder because most of us have not done that since like primary school probably. Or you can try the 2-line. So this is what I came up with. I don't know what your papers look like. I'd love to see some afterwards. Another thing that would be nice to practice, I can probably go back to the big slide with the samples. There. Is to draw some objects around you. So you can draw, for example, a cup, or maybe one of the speakers, a camera, the laptop, a book. Oh. And if you're done with those challenges, you can try some of those people. Try the stick figure and the star method and the gray method. For example, a running person. That's not really nice. So are there any questions? Well, as I said, I've sometimes given a presentation for my colleagues to tell them about all the things I've learned during the conference. I think last year in November or something, I went to the XP days and I was at a client and they had these monthly knowledge exchange meetings and they didn't have a speaker. And I said, well, if you want, I can tell what I saw at the XP days. And spent an hour talking about the 2 days of sessions that I'd seen. And I also often shared my sketch notes via Twitter because, well, they might help people who have seen the session and they might help to spark interest for the subject to those who have not. I don't have the illusion that my sketch notes will be very, very helpful for people who have not seen the session. But it's still cool to say, hey, look what I can do. Now show me yours and see if you can do better. I've recently also learned that there are lots, so this subject is gaining more and more traction in the, well, basically everywhere. And there are now also hand lettering workshops where you can learn all these pretty fonts and what you can do with letters to make it look prettier. Usually they use it for people who have small stores and who have this chalkboard in front of the entrance to sell stuff. Like the cafes say, hey, this is my daily menu, and they teach you how to make those really pretty. I still haven't been able to go to one of those workshops, but I fully intend to. I'm sorry?
Like little details and more advanced shadows and make the whole thing look more plastic and can you recommend any of the books teaching you how to details?
They do give some hints on putting little lines around things. But these are really the basics. I know there's also a sketchnoting workbook that will probably do a lot more, but I haven't got that one yet. And I think once you start and you get involved in the entire Sketchnote community through the Sketchnote army and stuff, you'll find more and more resources as you go. What I've also done is I bought, for example, this book is about fantasy letters. I bought it at the camping shop in the toys department because it was, when you go camping, you can write these letters as if you're a kid. But I figured that it was like €5 or €6, and it makes nice, it gives you ideas on how to make your letters look prettier. I've also got some books on how to draw cartoons, because I've also been to conferences where they had panels with panelists, and well, the content wasn't that interesting. So I spent my time drawing the panelists as cartoons and had a lot of fun entertaining myself during a boring talk that way. And it can also look really nice if you draw a picture of the speaker in one of the corners of your sketchnote. That's usually something you do before the session, because otherwise it takes a lot of time, so you'll miss half the session if you do. So it's usually wiser to do that with, like up front, based on a picture. So was that a 10 minutes or a minus 10 minutes? Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of books you can just get at stores like De Slechte and all those budget bookstores. They have lots of resources for drawing that you can use in your sketchnotes as well. Because you don't have to do art, but if you have a few minutes to spare or you do the two-phase, you've got loads of time to do that if you like. For example, I tried to make sketchnotes of my latest holiday last summer, only to find out that they didn't really turn out like sketchnotes and more like a graphical diary. I basically drew all the photographs I took in a notebook with pencil. And it wasn't ideas anymore, it turned into art. It was cool, but not sketchnotes. Any more questions? You'll find me the rest of the day. Sadly, I can't be here tomorrow, so if you have any questions that you want to ask in private, you'll have to find me today. Or just tweet me through Dutch's founder. And I'll let you go to your lunches. Thank you very much.